Hi, welcome. Before I begin, there are three things I want to address. First off, this specific podcast is an English project. Future podcasts down the future will be stuff that I want to do on my own. But there was an English project that I was assigned about talking about something that you have a chip on your shoulder about and applying tools that we used all year. So I kind of thought, I was going to do a podcast anyway, so let me do a podcast for that project. So I'll try not to swear in the first one because this first podcast itself is for school, but as I go on later on, this is a topic I have a large chip on my shoulder, so yeah, but I hope you enjoy. Secondly, I will be going by Josie in this. I want to remain faceless on the internet, so here on the podcast and on Twitter, where I will operate in a way, I will go by Josie. If I see any of you put my real name in the comments here or on Twitter, I will delete or ask that it is deleted, because I would like to remain anonymous. That also means, please no pictures of me. Faceless, yeah. Finally, I would like to preface this certain podcast with the fact that this is a very difficult topic. If you get uncomfortable with the talks of genocide or death, or if this triggers you, there's going to be talks I'm going to reference the Holocaust and the Cambodian Genocide, along with the topic about this being about the genocide in China. Do not watch. Take this as a trigger warning, I guess. But yeah, now on with the podcast. Hello, welcome to the Unnamed podcast. I am your host, Josie, and welcome. So, kind of just to begin, you might be wondering, why is it called the Unnamed podcast? Well, I'm really bad at names. I am awful at names, and I was kind of thinking, there's so many podcasts out there, I don't know what to name it, and besides, I'm someone who likes to talk about, a large range of topics. Right now, in this episode, I will be talking about about genocide in general, because that's kind of just been my mantra all year during AP Lang. But, also, I want to talk about hockey, I want to talk about books I like, probably going to talk about College Board, talk about social media, current day events, just all sorts of stuff. This first one will be a solo podcast because it is for a school project. But yeah, so the topic in this first episode will be about the genocide in China. I'm kind of bringing comparisons to the Cambodian genocide and also talking about the Holocaust in that. So the topic that for the project that I was given is talking about something that I have a large chip on my shoulder. And kind of all year, I've had this, ever since I've read this really good book, and where is that book? I don't know where I put it, but it's called A Problem from Hell. It's America in the Age of Genocide. It's by Samantha Power. Highly suggest reading it. Highly suggest reading it. I read it, and I resonated with the Cambodian genocide was something that I read in there, and I was like, oh my lord. And so I kind of just made the entire year, I've just been talking about genocides, using it in different argument essays and whatnot. If you're taking AP Lang, then you probably know what I'm talking about. However, I have to say, I was so close in talking about, the NHL player safety, which will probably be the next episode. But I was like, this is my mantra all year about genocide. So I was like, I gotta talk about that for my last project, and plus the stuff going on in China I think is very important to talk about. So later on I will talk about NHL player safety, especially the hits that happened. Oh my god, Jets, Montreal, oh my god. Yeah, that's a later topic. Well, I'll go into that later, because I know as soon as I'll start talking about that, I probably will have some very choice words to say that may include some swears, and as this is a project, I probably shouldn't include that, because it's for school, Yeah. Cool. So, I guess kind of just starting off, I guess I'll start off with the genocide that is happening in China. If you guys don't know, there is a genocide that is occurring right now. It is, let me pull something up. It is the genocide of the Uyghur Muslims. And this has been something that's been going on for over a year now. I remember at the beginning of quarantine, I saw these like different information stuff from like on Instagram where people are posting like I wouldn't say infomercials, but like these like posts like that was like image graphics being like, this is what's happening in China right now, you guys should be aware of it, and it like was spreading through wildfire on people's Instagram stories. I was guilty of it. I did that. I spread it on my Instagram story and then kind of fell victim to like the phenomenon on social media, which I'll get into later. But so I guess I'll just start off with some facts about China and the Uyghur Muslim genocide, along with what is a genocide. And then I'll be going back to my Model UN presentation that I made about this. So there is a cultural genocide that's happening in China right now. They're wiping out the cultural identity of Uyghur Muslims by sending them to different quote-unquote re-education camps. I just did the quote-unquote with my hands. You can't see me because I don't have a camera on. Oh my god. Along with that, there are also reports of women being operated on so they can no longer have children. So this, among so many other things, like the re-education camps are basically like educating these Uyghur Muslims to no longer identify that, but rather go along with more of the China belief system. And China is communist, so do with that as you will. So that's kind of just like a quick background. However, and that was like the basic information I got when I first learned about it, that there is a there is a genocide happening, cultural genocide. They're re-educating these people. This is like a modern day Holocaust. And that's basically like the short and simple gist of it. However, there's so much more, and it kind of just goes back to what is a genocide. So the term genocide, it's more of a legal term. Like, you may not realize, like, there's a large history behind the term genocide. The word itself didn't exist before 1944, but in 1944, Raphael Lemkin, a Jewish man, he was a Polish lawyer, I believe, and he was Jewish, and he had to run because of Germans of World War II. If you don't know that history, then what are you doing? but yeah, so he created the term genocide because he wanted a way to like charge the people who caused this horrific action, like charge them and make sure they got what they deserved in the end, which is like prosecution for the horrific actions that they had. So in reality, genocide is a very legal. It's legal in nature. And while people may put it on like, oh, there is a genocide right now in Israel with the whole Palestine thing. There is a genocide. There's a genocide of Native Americans, especially like now with all the news coming to light about those schools in Canada. Like that's another topic for another time. But it's the Genocide Convention, law. It's a law. That's what the word was created for. And I don't think many people understand that. So I think it's important to highlight that and that importance. So what is the genocide law? Genocide means any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group's condition of life, calculated to bring about its physical destruction in or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcefully transferring children of the group to another group. Now, that's the law right there, copied word for word that I have. That can be applied to the genocide that's happening in China, and that's why many people have labeled that, rightfully so, as a genocide, because there are members of the group who are killed, or there are members of the group who are have serious bodily or mental harms. they are inflicting upon group conditions of life, calculated to bring apart its physical destruction, whole or in part. They are imposing measures that intend to prevent the bursts within the group, and they are forcefully transferring children of the group to another group. All 5 points of the Genocide Convention and law, that's covered. So what's happening in China with the Uyghur Muslims is a genocide. And what kind of brought this to light, which kind of made me talk about it again, was this one news article that I saw, and let me pull it up for a second. And I think it's important because, like, at the beginning, I'm sure as you heard, as I heard, they were just like, they're removing the cultural identity. There wasn't much on how they're removing the cultural identity, but they were. And it was just like they're re-educating them, and some of them are being killed. But in reality, there's a lot more to it that I didn't realize. And so it's breaking. China has moved towards carrying out the equivalent of a final solution on Uyghur Muslims, with the plans to kill 1/3, lock up 1/3, and convert 1/3 of the Uyghur population. So these are the words. So the article starts off with saying this. Quote unquote quotes, this situation is much, much worse than what is being reported. The Uyghur people have disappeared. Death is everywhere right now. And those are the words of Dr. Eric Siddiq, a Uyghur American who is the president of Uyghur Projects Foundation and a senior advisor for the World Uyghur Congress. He claims that the total number of Uyghur detainees in camps in China and those presumed dead now exceeds the total number of Jews detained and killed during the Holocaust. Which is insane when you think about it. Like, the genocide, that whenever you think of the word genocide, the first genocide that you think of is either the Armenian genocide or the Holocaust. Those are the first two that I think of whenever I think of the word genocide. And to compare this current one now to what happened, I think 80 years ago, it's important. And I think it's something that has been passed up a lot. Sidnick believes that the reports in the international media about the situation, and I'm going to mispronounce this because I can't speak, Xinjiang, are essentially 2 years behind current realities on the group. And if you guys are wondering the word that I can't pronounce, it's spelled Xinjing. I am horrible at pronunciation, so I am so sorry if I mispronounce something. If you're watching this and you know how to pronounce that, please put that in the comments below, and I figure out for later times if I do talk about this subject, and I might do that because I think it's a very important subject to talk about. But yeah. More than 80% of the population has disappeared in 4 years. Recent visitors to the area are told that you cannot find Uyghur people, not on the streets, not in the city, not on the farms. And because China is so effective in kind of just limiting the amount of information that gets out to the rest of the world, because they control social media, because they control the internet, because it is a communist state, a lot of the information that we have about the genocide that is happening is very limited. It's very small. It's kind of just, it's hard to be like, oh yeah, here are photo evidence. It's kind of like what happened with the Armenian genocide, where people were like, we want photo evidence, and they had to smuggle that out. And yeah, it's hard to find words for just how, it's hard to find words for a genocide that's happening like this. It is so, I guess, disgusting that people think, oh yeah, no, this is fine. It's fine to have a genocide. We don't care. But anyways, let me continue on with the article. I'm just pulling out some choice quotes from it that I think are very important and that are highlighted. We know from a trove of leaked Chinese Communist Party documents that Xi Jinping gave a speech to the government officials in Xinjiang in 2014, in which he told them to use the organs of dictatorship against the Uyghur minority and show them absolutely no mercy. And then Sidnick claims that the Chinese President Xi Jinping took a top secret decision in 2014 to kill 1/3 of all Uyghurs, lock up 1/3, and convert 1/3 to Chinese Communist Party ideology. 1/3 of the population that China has chosen to lock up rather than kill or convert serve only one of 5 purposes: forced labor, COVID-19 vaccine testing, organ harvesting, biological weapon testing, and proof of life. And they're leaving the rest to die eventually from either starvation, disease, or exhaustion, or worse. And then I'm not gonna say this because this is just like disgusting, and I don't know if I really can say this online, but talking about how some female students were R-worded. I am not gonna say it makes me very but Uyghur women are subjected to forced sterilizations, forced contraception, and forced abortions. Along with the government's been experimenting vaccines on the entire Uyghur population. What this is the Chinese authorities injected these people with the coronavirus first before they are given the vaccine. After they are infected, these people they check on. After they infected these people, they check on the results to see if the vaccine worked or not. And that's just like as someone who lives in the United States of America, and while there are some things that are very messed up here, messed up everywhere around the world, certainly some things here. I think freedom, the idea of choice is often, people often don't realize how much freedom they actually have. When it comes to vaccines, and this is a process that I know more about because I have family who work as doctors and nurses and stuff like that who have worked with COVID and stuff like that. And it's something that you volunteer for. You volunteer to get the vaccine. You volunteer to accept the risks, and to force that on a minority that you're already abusing, and it's just disgusting, And this information, this is recent information, and I haven't seen that spread around and talked about. So, and I'll go on to more of that later. But along with that, the government has turned this region into a deranged cultural version of Disneyland, or what he calls Uyghur Land, where tourist attractions are dressed up to give the appearance and normalcy of Uyghur cultural life, with Han Chinese participants and actors, not actual Uyghur people. The people you see in Xinjiang, I can't pronounce that still, I am so sorry. Tourist attractions are Han Chinese but dressed up like Uyghurs to deceive the world. If 18 million is accurate, and if China is claiming that the current population is fewer than 7 million or 11.65 million, as stated in 2010 census, then that would mean that somewhere in the range of 6 to 11 million Uyghur people are currently unaccounted for, a number that should send shockwaves around the world. To put that into comparison, I believe 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust, and a lot of them went missing when they went to the concentration camps. So if you compare that, it's insane. It's really hard to put in comparison, and for us, for people who are my age, which is teenagers and stuff like that, and young adults, you've never lived through something, I think, something that can be compared to the Holocaust. And have something that's going on right now that's not talked about. And the Holocaust wasn't talked about. People didn't know the Holocaust was happening. It's insane. It's baffling. It's hard to grasp your mind on this. So extreme measures, going back to the articles, extreme measures to hide any trace of the disappeared include using chemicals to decompose body rather than using mass graves. China is on the way to murdering 10 million Uyghurs in Xinjiang, a number that would make it the largest scale genocide of the religious or ethnic minority since and including the Holocaust. And that's kind of it on that article. Those were choice pieces that I decided to pull out. but it's important to understand this, because looking at it, that's a large population. That is following the definition, that is killing members of the group, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm, deliberately inflicting on the group's condition of life, imposing measures that intend to prevent births, and there's also, like, I heard other stuff, like when the first information spread was going around about forcefully transferring children of the group to another group. Now, one thing that, like, you might be like me and sitting here and looking at that and be like, that's happening, that information's out there, how come we haven't heard of that? How come that's not talked about on social media? Why hasn't that been talked about on social media? Why is the last time we talked about this a year ago? I'm gonna call them infomercials, even that's probably not the right definition, or those different posts on Instagram were going around in people's stories. It's because social media moves like that. Like, I'm probably gonna hear that I snap my fingers, but it moves so fast. It's here and then it's gone. It's here and then it's gone. Take for example the Black Lives Matter movement. I saw posts about that for maybe like 2-3 weeks, and then it finished. No one else posted about that. It was on to the next thing. It was on to the Uyghur Muslims and that genocide. And then it was on the Me Too movement. And then it was on this. And then it was on this. It just keep moving. But before we even move on to the next, after we move on to the next thing, we haven't even solved the problem that we were first talking about. And while sometimes you might be like, well, how do we solve that? How do you solve a genocide? It's really hard to. But it's important to bring awareness to it. But if you keep bringing awareness to it, that will help. And I feel like that's something that social media has kind of lost. You know? A comparison that, like, it's something that my teacher brought up today, and I thought it was very important to kind of, like, explore that opportunity, like, that idea while talking through it, is like, what would happen if the Holocaust was right now? Would it be the same thing like the genocide that's happening in China, where people would talk about it, then move on to the next big thing? Yeah, I honestly think so. If you look at what's been happening in Palestine, that conflict is still ongoing, but people have moved on. People are on to the next topic, the next thing, without really getting without even trying to solve the original problem at hand. I took AP seminar. I was one of the AP classes I took this year, and my, I don't know if I'm probably allowed to talk about this, whatever. They're probably going to publish this anyways, and everyone talks about it anyways. But one of my documents for the second essay, which is like the synthesis, was about youth activism. And one of the things that they mentioned is that people like spread around stuff on social media, but that just moves on so quickly, and then they're on to the next thing, and that's the difficult thing that people don't understand about politics. And this is something that I can kind of expand on too, is that people demand action immediately, but then after a couple of weeks, after social media has died down on that topic and then moved on to the next topic, that demand for change stops. And one thing that I know about politics from years of just watching politics, watching the train wreck that was Donald Trump's presidency, and now watching Biden's presidency, oh my God, I can't speak, is that stuff takes time. There is a process. You got to go through the House. You got to go through the Senate. And right now there's a filibuster in the Senate because, you see, Republicans... Democrats also aren't great, but there's a process to that, and people don't stick long enough to keep pushing for that process. And by that time, people are like, okay, they're not demanding it. We're going to go take care of what we want to take care of. We're not going to go with what they want to take care of, and that can be very harmful. And I think that's something that's kind of taken hold a little bit. I think if the Holocaust was happening right now, kind of going along with this social media, I guess, trend that I'm talking about, I feel like people would talk about it for maybe a week and then move on. Because in the moment, it may not seem like such a big deal. I mean, it may seem like a big deal, but like after it dies down, people are like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. In reality, it is. This is the killing of so many people. This is wiping out the cultural identity of so many people. This is the torturing. This is the harming of so many people. This is removing the cultural identity and forcing them to be someone that they're not. Like, imagine how can I put this in comparison that people would understand? Let me think. Imagine that I'll use Christianity, I guess. Imagine that, because that's the popular religion in the U.S. All forms of Christianity, Catholicism, Christianity, Protestantism, just that umbrella. Imagine if you were told, yeah, you're not allowed to worship that anymore. We're going to take you into these different concentration camps, quote unquote re-education camps. We're going to test the vaccine on you without your permission. Well, it is good to get vaccinated, yes, but again, that unlawful testing on people, like that is just, people take freedom for granted, but like that I feel like is very unjust in my opinion. We're gonna take you to re-education camps. Females, we're gonna remove your reproductive organs. You're not gonna be able to reproduce or anything. You're not gonna be able to have children. We're gonna force that on you. We're going to do all sorts of harm to you. We're gonna R-word you. I'm again not gonna say the word, but I'm sure you know what I mean. We're going to kill some of you. We're going to have you do forced labor. We're going to do different biological tests on you. We're going to do all of this. That's what's happening to this minority, the Uyghur Muslims. And imagine the outrage. Imagine how you'd feel if like you're one of the people who were to survive, to go out and see that people knew about it but didn't really say anything. Didn't really do anything. I feel like that's just doing them a large just injustice. They've gone through hell. They're going through hell, and we're doing nothing. You know? And I feel like this is something that, and I'm going to kind of move to the more political side of this now. This is something I can compare to the Cambodian genocide. This is a genocide that I've done a lot of research on. I've spent a lot of time just dissecting on and kind of just trying to understand it in like the U.S. point of view. The Cambodian genocide was the mass killing of Cambodians. 13 to 33% of the population was killed. Of the Cambodian population was killed. That's 1,300,000 to 3 million Cambodians. Ignoring the fact that the U.S. helped start it, like, first and foremost, the U.S. helped start it. I could probably do a rant someday if you ever want me to. Let me know about that. But the U.S. knew about this genocide. They knew about it, like we know about the genocide that's happening now. They knew about the gruesome stories from the Cambodians that escaped. And while there are, I don't know if there's any Uyghur Muslims that have escaped, like, we've heard the stories. We've heard what's happening. Maybe not as gruesome as what the Cambodians told us during the Cambodian genocide, but we knew. We knew what was happening. There was a congressman who was constantly on the floor trying to pass the genocide law, because the genocide law hadn't been passed in the United States by that point, because it's the U.S. What do you expect? But, and there he was telling, like, some of the stories that were happening. There was news reporters who were constantly covering the Cambodian genocide. There was one news reporter who, with two others, went to Cambodia and had, like, kind of, I guess you could say, like, the North Korea tour, where, like, it was very, like, proctored. This is this is that. You can't go over there, you know, where the killing and the genocide was happening. And during the night, one of the reporters got killed, and the other reporters came back like, this is what's happening in Cambodia. And the U.S. was like, no, it's fine. And the U.S. did nothing to step in. They only stepped in after Vietnam stopped the genocide in around like, I think it was between 10 and 20 days. And the U.S. knew that, like, the Khmer Rouge, the ones who were doing the genocide on the Cambodians, were very weak. Numerous people in the government had said that that's, like, they could go in, they could step in, they would face, none of the soldiers would really die, and they would be stopping a genocide, but the U.S. didn't do anything until Vietnam stepped in, and then they ended up putting the Khmer Rouge in charge. Yeah. It's just frustrating at this point. Like, I have, like, you can't see my face. But I have such, like, just a defeated look. It's just, politics sometimes just baffle me, but back to my point. And, like, one of the things that happened during the Cambodian genocide that I can compare to what's happening to the Uyghur Muslims right now in that genocide is that politicians are doing very little. And I think it's important to stand up for what's happening in China. I understand. China is a powerhouse nation. They are one of the most powerful nations in the world. They have a large foot in the UN. Hold on a sec, let me pull up the percentage. I think they have, like, I think it was like 12% or something like that. Or they're like the second largest donators to the UN. Yeah, they donate the second most amount of money after the US, showing that they have a large foothold in the UN. And you have the UN just sitting there saying nothing. You have the US just really sitting there and doing nothing. The only things that I saw from my research so far of people really standing up and saying anything is that and though Japan is one of the few nations calling for China to stop the quote-unquote re-education of Uyghur Muslims, on January 19th, 2021, less than 24 hours before the end of Trump's presidency, outgoing U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo released a statement which accused China of the ongoing genocide against the Uyghur population. This view was then endorsed by incoming Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Along with that, on February 22nd, 2001, the Canadian Parliament voted that China has committed a genocide against the Uyghur Muslim population, although Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his cabinet members abstained. And I have friends in Canada, and they all hate his guts. So take that as you will. But that's, like, really it. The UN hasn't stepped in. And then, while I don't expect anything from the UN because it's the UN, when do we ever expect anything from the UN? Especially after the failure in Rwanda. The UN is kind of just, like, just sits there and looks pretty. And then they don't really do much. I think the thing that really frustrates me, and this is kind of like my last point of, like, calling out to politicians, is that politicians have really said nothing. I follow a lot of notable politicians on Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that, and a bunch of them are like a bunch of prominent ones. AOC, I need to follow Bernie Sanders. I'm surprised I actually don't follow him. Okay. I think it's Alyssa Presley. I follow like I think I follow like the Big Four. In the House of Representatives, I follow Elizabeth Warren. There's just like a bunch of people that, and I keep up with what's going on in politics in like the Senate, the House, the presidency. I remember I caught the flu in, I think, fall of 2019, and during the 2 days that I was at home, 2 to 3 days, I was just watching the impeachment trials. Like, I was just sitting there on my computer binge watching the entire thing. Like, I stay updated on what's happening in politics, and I have seen politicians, I haven't seen anybody speak up about this. And I think that's just the largest injustice. The fact that no one has really stepped out and noticed how, and like, seen, there's been people, there's been reporters, there's been a couple of people who have spoken about what they've gone through. And they've been shouting from the rooftops. And I think, again, I am going to put part of the blame on the social media effect, where, like, people talk about it for, like, a couple of days and then move on. Like, I understand there's a lot going on. I understand you want to focus on local matters. You want to focus on national matters and not go around the world and focus on the matters around the world. And yeah, there isn't much that you can do to try and stop this, but there is something. You can at least spread the word. I have seen nobody talk about this. It's insane. Like, there is a genocide happening right now. There is a genocide. And for all the people who are saying genocides are bad, that what is happening in Israel and what is happening Israel and Palestine, that thing is a genocide. What about what's happening? What about China? What about the Uyghur Muslims who are going through a genocide right now and it has been labeled for a genocide for over half a year, and this has been going on for over a year? There has been information about this for over a year. Why has nothing happened? Why has no politician stood up and being like, I'm against this. Let's go stop this genocide. Let's go help to try and stop this genocide or prevent this from happening anywhere else. People talk about prevention of genocides. People talk about it and say, that's what we need to do. That's what needs to happen. We need to prevent genocides. And then do nothing. It's insane. People are like, we can never let the Holocaust happen again. We need to remember Holocaust victims. We need to remember those who were killed in the Holocaust and those who survived and still have to live with those atrocities on their mind. For the relatives who had people go through the Holocaust. What about the people who are going through a Holocaust, who's going through something like the Holocaust now? Another genocide. The list of genocides are staggering. It is insane how many genocides have happened and just how nothing has really happened. Like, I'm just gonna list off genocide since the genocide Genocide Convention happened. Let me go through it. So it's Guatemala, the genocide in Bangladesh, the genocide in Burundi, the genocide in Uganda, the Cambodian genocide, the East Timor genocide, the Anfal genocide, the Isaac genocide, the Bosnian genocide, the Rwanda genocide. Oh my god. Like, people talk about the Rwanda genocide and see how that much is still haunting that area, and they don't do anything about this one. The Bambuti genocide, the Darfur genocide, the genocide of Yazidis and Isna, the Rohingya genocide, which is happening now in Myanmar. There are so many genocides that have happened since, and there are politicians who claim that they're protectors of the people, that they want to help the world. And I understand. I completely understand that there's so much going on in the world right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There is conflicts in Israel and Palestine right now. We just went through an extremely rocky presidency in which we had an insurrection to end it off. I understand there's the filibuster right now in the Senate, which is preventing so many like things from happening, productive things happening regarding law and such. I understand that there is the new Jim Crow that's happening right now, where Republicans are trying to stop Black people from voting. And that last one is horrific. And I probably will do like another like podcast or something like that on that. But what about this genocide? Like, and what can we do? Like, you might be wondering, like, oh, Josie, you're showing all this. You're like, hey, this is happening. They need to do something. But what can they do? Well, first off, call out China. Plain and simple. Call them out. Be like, hey, you can't do that. The U.S., have you seen how much we spend on military? You see how much we spend there? Well, threaten. You can just threaten them. Be like, hey, you cannot do that. You cannot kill a minority. You cannot cause a genocide. Impose and tariffs. There's all different diplomatic ways that you can threaten and say, stop this. Stop. You cannot have a genocide of the Uyghur minority. You cannot let that happen. And then I think at the very least, something that we can do as a whole, as we can do as a nation, as we can do as individuals, is talk about this. Spread the word about this. Because I have heard nothing. The fact that nobody is talking about this, the fact that very few people have said, this is what's happening, we need to say something, we need to do something, we need to call to our politicians to talk about this, we need to tell our politicians, hey, you need to do something about this. I think that's also just as large of an injustice. Because politicians, in the end, they're doing what they can to stay in office. They're doing what they can to please the people. And if we show that we don't want this genocide to happen, then we want the politicians to stop this, we need to show that. We need to be like, hey, enough is enough. We need to stop this genocide. We need to stop it now, and it just needs to end. I think that's really just all my points there. I covered all of them. Yeah. Wow. How long was that? That was like a 40-minute rant right there. Fun. I've talked about genocides way too much this school year, and doesn't mean I'm stopping, but yeah. I guess it's time to do my outro. Yeah, first ever podcast. Let's go. This is going to be a more repeat thing. I definitely want to cover a lot of topics. NHL player safety is definitely going to be, I think, my next one. Probably talk about the college process, college board. Oh my lord, I have so many choice words to say. Probably video games. I love playing video games. I have a bunch of friends who play video games. If you're wondering if there's ever going to be guests on this, I think I'm going to try to. I need to figure out recording. This setup that I'm doing right now, like the recording setup, I need to work on. I need to figure that out. But yeah. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for showing up to the first ever episode of the Unnamed podcast. Yeah. Thank you. My Twitter's going to be in the link description, where you can just, if you want to follow that to kind of see updates and stuff, I'll update on like how the podcast is going, and you can kind of just see me be me. I am a dedicated Chromebook hate page. Hell yeah. Oh boy. But yeah, thank you for watching or listening, because I have nothing on the screen. Gotta figure that out. Peace.